Hello and welcome to my podcast, Conversations with David. I'm your host, David Owasi. And on this podcast, we're talking to accomplished professionals and entrepreneurs across the country. We are learning about what keeps them passionate, what keeps them going, and we're also learning lessons along the way. Now, I'm here with my friend, Margaux Miller, someone who I have huge respect for, a titan in our community here in Winnipeg. And I'm very excited to have her on the show today. Why don't you introduce yourself, Margaux?
Oh my gosh, thanks so much, David, for having me. Yeah, so as you said, I'm Margaux Miller, and currently I'm the program director for Tech Manitoba. And I also host a podcast on the side, which is called Start Podcast. And we interview specifically startups and only the founders of those startups from the Canadian Prairies.
One of the things that is associated with you is your passion for telling the stories of local startups and for connecting people in your community, in our community. We are Winnipeggers together. And that is something that has been a hallmark of your career. Can you just share with me why that is important to you? And just tell me more about, your work with that podcast as well as Tech Manitoba with sharing the stories of local startups and connecting people.
We have such interesting things happening in the prairies, in Manitoba, in Winnipeg. And right now with the pandemic and leading up to the holidays, people are certainly pushing, supporting local. We do that on our show. You're doing that through your efforts here too. But when we started the podcast, what we realized was we don't hear enough of these amazing stories of what's going on in our province. I would go, be traveling to other cities for work, let's say, like maybe I'm at a conference in Toronto, and people would kind of go, oh, Winnipeg, what's going on there? Why do you live there? That kind of thing. And I'd have all these great stories for them. And by the time they would finish talking to me, they'd go, actually, cool. Maybe I want to come visit Winnipeg. But we all need to have that, right? And we all need to have the stories. I happen to work in an industry where I get those stories and I'm asking all the time, it's my personality. But if you're not that person, how do you get those anecdotes and those stories so that when you're at your next dinner party or your next Zoom chat with friends, if we're still in the pandemic, how do you get those stories? And so we said, let's start a show that does exactly that. So when we started Start Podcast, we wanted to share these stories of amazing businesses here so that on one hand, people could find out about them and support them and we could promote an awesome business. And then on the other side of it, really champion and have something that people could take out there and no longer have an excuse, to let people say that we live somewhere that isn't quite up to snuff, because we have so many amazing things happening here. We just need more outlets to share them, right? And so podcasts like this one and Start Podcast are such a great way to do that.
But I know one of your passions, Margaux, is really supporting women in tech and having more representation for women in tech. Can you just share more about your passion about that specific, problem or challenge, if you will, and how perhaps you're approaching helping to improve the diversity of women in tech?
Absolutely. It first started when I worked at a small tech company and I could see the very obvious delineation in roles of women in more support roles and men in the more technical roles. And since then, I started working at Tech Manitoba, so at the association, and we have a program specifically around gender parity. So I got a chance to really dig into it so much deeper. And we have a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of space to improve. Manitoba is doing well against the national average. We're basically on par with it at around 25 to 27% women working in tech. But that's not necessarily the goal that you want to reach, right? We want to be way further ahead of that. That's just saying, okay, we're consistent with other provinces. So what we're doing at Tech Manitoba is twofold. We basically undertook a bunch of research to first ask the community, what are those barriers to girls and women moving into the tech space? We said, okay, first part we're hearing is they need a community. The second part that we were hearing is that companies who were trying to undertake a process of gender parity and diversity, and this is, again, we're seeing a ton of webinars and stuff about this in the community, but what they're telling us is either we have a quick webinar and okay, yes, we're thinking about it, or we have this huge tool and it's years of work and where the heck do we get started, right? So we did two things. One, we started a group called the Manitoba Women in Tech Meetup Group. So you can just go to meetup.com and find that. We meet the third Wednesday of every month. And our last two events have had almost 100 women at each one. We just started this a couple months ago. Yes, so amazing start, especially for a virtual event. That's free. And then for the company side of it, if you're in charge of recruitment at a company and you want to get more women in there, there are a bunch of things that you can do to start with. And again, like I know if you started Googling it or you started on this project, it feels daunting. There's so much information out there. So contact us at Tech Manitoba. We've got this new guide that's basically a checklist of things that you can do. It's got different indicators to show you, like you can find where you are on the scale to kind of see how your company's doing, and use that as a great place to start and use as a baseline tool. So again, to not scare you away from a huge project, we started with something that was really tangible. So we're super excited to have just launched that too, and just, slowly move the dial, right?
No